She-Hulk. It's bad. But brace yourself, because I'm about to say something very controversial. And no, it isn't about me being groped by my female dentist. It's about She-Hulk, because I think this episode may be the high point of the series. It's maybe 4 out of 10, so still not great, and this gives me very mixed feelings, because although this episode is better than I've come to expect from She-Hulk, it's bittersweet, because they could have been doing this for all 9 episodes instead of the rubbish that they have been doing. So, what is the highlight and what's the lowlight of this episode? And here's the weird thing, because it's the same moment. It's later in this episode after Jen loses a court case to the lawyer Matt Murdock, the Daredevil from the Netflix series, and Daredevil was a lot better than this series. So Jen goes to a bar after the case to drown her sorrows, and someone across the bar buys Jen a drink, an apple teeny. The camera pans and it's Matt Murdock, and how did she not see him? He was hidden from us behind her hair, but for her he would be clearly visible. So Matt and Jen spar and they flirt a little, and it all kind of works. I don't think that they have bad chemistry. Charlie Cox just raises the level of this show and he grounds the whole thing at the same time. It's hard to say why. Maybe it's like a house's foundation. The show goes on a lot of ridiculous flights of fancy, and without something grounded to compare it to, it just doesn't work for me. So the best part here is Charlie Cox. In this show, he's a breath of fresh air. And here's where we hit the big problem, because Jen asks Matt why he's in California when he practices in Hell's Kitchen, and he explains how he does a lot of pro bono work, but to pay for that, sometimes he has to work with rich clients, and this case was one of those. Jen says to Matt, as someone who works for the big guys, she doesn't have energy to help anyone else, and Matt tells her she's in a position to do some real good. The way he sees it, he says, Jen Walters can use the law to help people when society fails them, and She-Hulk can help people when the law fails them. And he's right, and this is the catalyst for Jen stopping being such a selfish bint. It's somewhat of an arc for her. So, what's my problem with it? Firstly, it's come far too late in the series. This is episode 8 of 9. In the comics, she came to this conclusion on her own at the end of the first issue. She was helping people in issue 1. Helping people was how she became She-Hulk in the first place. In the 1980 comic, this is a decision and a conclusion that Jen came to on her own. Now that decision has been taken away from her as a character. All her agency has been taken away. She's not doing it because she thinks it's right. Up to now, she's only cared about herself. She's doing it because a man told her to, and not just any man, because she wouldn't listen to her cousin Bruce Banner when he wanted to help people. And again, I'm not sure if this whole thing is an idiot trying to push feminism or a crafty trolling sideswipe at feminism, because they've taken an idealistic character who was her own woman, who wanted to help people, and now she's just helping people, seemingly because she wants to impress a hot guy. Do the writers not understand how bad this looks? I don't think I consider myself to be a male feminist. For some reason, I find the kill all men and all men are trash mantras of modern feminism to be somewhat toxic, and try as I might, I just can't manage to be misogynistic enough to be a male feminist, even with the very concerted effort many women are making to be extra hateful. And even I don't like what the writers have done here, because if I had a daughter, I would want her to be so much more than this. These allegedly feminist writers have written a character and she seems to live purely for male validation and attention, and what I would want for my daughter is that she live a happy, full and wise life. And She-Hulk may be the worst role model for young women I've ever seen. And don't forget, these writers boasting that 8-year-old girls were watching their show. Like these writers have valuable lessons to teach them. All the writers seem to know how to teach is how to be miserable. The writers have also changed Jen's mum and dad. Her mum was dead in the source material, killed by the same mobster that tried to kill Jen, and that's where Jen got her desire for justice from. That and from her father, who was the sheriff, a person she greatly admired and wanted to be like. And it created a lot of situations where Jen and her father were in conflict. when her dad was trying to catch She-Hulk, not knowing it was his own daughter he was chasing. It was quite powerful stuff. In the end, Jen's father realises that he has to change. He'd cut his daughter off after the death of his wife. He'd failed his daughter. He'd not been there for her when she needed him the most, and by the time he realises, it's too late. Now that was all in the comics in the 1980s run. In contrast, in the TV version, Jen's mother is still alive. Her father is not even a character, he's just a way for the writers to broadcast more of their angst and daddy issues. So yes, this episode is the season high point for me, and it probably came after most of the viewers had already stopped watching. She-Hulk, it's bad, but this episode is probably the best of the lot. When I started doing YouTube reviews, I gave shows grades, but to make them make sense, I had to grade on a curve. Hollywood has broken my review system by repeatedly releasing things that are so bad they fall outside of the grading. I was giving She-Hulk Fs, and then Witcher Blood Origin came along. So we start off on a bad note. The show does a replay of stuff from past episodes, of Jen from episode 1 saying she didn't want to be a superhero, Hulk asking what else she was going to do, and a montage of Jen twerking, drinking, belching and generally being a moron, and all of this stings because this series could have been so much better than this. So they're replaying some of the arc that will lead to Jen eventually becoming a superhero in the Charlie Cox bar scene, and this is just not a revelation that a 30-something woman should be having because she likes a boy. Don't misunderstand, this episode is still bad. There's an awful lot wrong with it. What redeems it is that they actually do some superhero stuff in a superhero series, and they've only gotten around to that in episode 8 of 9 total. That and Charlie Cox's Daredevil elevates the whole thing, even if the writing for his character is off, and he's very different to the character from the Netflix series. He tries his best, and him and Tatiana Maslany seem to have genuinely good chemistry together. She acted better when she was on screen with him. On a lighter note, it appears Charlie Cox is coming back with another Daredevil series, but this time on Disney. So there may be at least one person at Disney that still has a functioning brain cell. Disney maybe couldn't move sooner because they didn't have the rights to Daredevil back from Netflix until March 2022, but the series isn't going to be released until 2024 apparently. In their place, I would have had a series planned out and scripted before they even got the rights back. They could have even filmed it ahead of time, so it seems to be in the works, but I don't hold out much hope for it. On Disney's current form, chances are it will be a disaster. We start off and some guys are robbing a store. A superhero turns up to stop them, a man called LeapFrog, and this is another legacy character like the guys from the last episode. This character is a Daredevil villain whose first appearance was all the way back in Daredevil number 25 from December 1966, so I went back and looked at LeapFrog's first appearance. And reading through this comic, I see immediately that Matt Murdock, the man in the Daredevil suit, I can't help but notice he's yet another redhead from the comics who now isn't. It's just another case of gingercide. Enough people have brought up what Disney are doing to Ariel the Little Mermaid, but no one is backing up the ginger guys, so I will. And from the opening issue of She-Hulk's cover, Jen was supposed to be ginger too. But no time for that nonsense now, I suppose. Back to She-Hulk. So, LeapFrog is a disaster as a superhero. He fails to stop the robbers and tries to use some jet boots to get away, and the legs of his costume catch fire. He's now at Jen's law firm trying to sue the Urkel looking guy that makes Jen's suits, because now LeapFrog has 3rd-degree burns on his legs. Jen doesn't want to take the case because of conflict of interest, but the firm wants her on it nonetheless. Frog Guy's dad is a big client of the law firm, and he wants She-Hulk. But She-Hulk likes her nice clothes that she gets from Urkel, and she doesn't want to annoy him. How shallow can she possibly get? So Jen goes to Urkel and tries to come to a settlement with him in order to avoid a court case altogether and not upset him. But Urkel gets irate at the implication that his work is faulty, very irate, so he wrecks the dress he was making for Jen for her upcoming award show, and he tells her to get out, as he calls her a greasy old buffalo. So it's going to court, and who turns up as Urkel's lawyer but Matt Murdock, Daredevil being played by Charlie Cox, and he's too good for this show. Jen loses the case in minutes as it transpires that Frog Guy had put jet fuel into his rocket boots against instructions from the tailor, so the judge fines for the tailor, which seems fair. If your Audi explodes because you filled the engine with TNT, that's hardly Audi's fault. Jen is later at a bar drowning her sorrows, as now Urkel is annoyed with her and won't give her clothes, she lost the case, and she's also a lush. So they do the whole Jen in a bar with Matt Murdock scene that I've already discussed. And then they get interrupted by work, and Jen has to go and meet Todd, the creepy guy, who keeps on turning up like a bad penny. Jen gets home and gets a call from LeapFrog, who's under attack by a mysterious assailant, so she goes as She-Hulk to help, and this is her first real attempt at actual heroism. 8 episodes into a 9 episode series that probably isn't going to be renewed. She-Hulk gets to the car park and meets LeapFrog, who has the attacker on the top of his car, and it's Daredevil. So She-Hulk won't listen and instead tries to fight Daredevil, but she's finding it difficult to land a blow on him, and that's good because he is essentially human. He isn't durable. If She-Hulk hits him, he'll likely die, and never mind the damage she's doing to the car park. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in property damage. She gets annoyed and throws a car at Daredevil, and who's going to pay for all of this damage? So finally, She-Hulk does the clap thing that creates a shockwave, and it looks like it breaks every car window near to her. What it would also do is probably render Daredevil permanently deaf, and it would be like that scene from The Boys where Homelander meets the Daredevil clone and permanently deafens him. I may have to review The Boys at some point because that series was a debacle. So She-Hulk wins and picks up Daredevil, taking off his mask and finding out that underneath it is Matt Murdock. Matt finally gets a chance to explain. LeapFrog is the bad guy. He's kidnapped Urkel and wants him to make a better suit for him, and Daredevil is just trying to rescue Urkel. So Jen just smashed up a multi-storey car park full of cars to defend a kidnapper because she couldn't be bothered finding out what was going on before she jumped in, all guns blazing. And then she never has to deal with it. Jen says she will just leave a note, and how's she going to pay for any of that damage? She-Hulk, and where did I leave off last time? Jen had just realised she'd royally screwed up by protecting LeapFrog and had probably done several $1 million of property damage by wrecking that car park to protect her kidnapper. So She-Hulk and Daredevil go to LeapFrog's not very secret lair, the lily pad. So Jen and Daredevil team up to rescue Urkel, and I'm not going to lie, this is the best the series gets. Daredevil wants to use stealth, She-Hulk wants to just smash in, so they argue. Daredevil goes in alone and starts taking out guards, and then She-Hulk smashes through the roof, and Daredevil is still fun. Some of the CGI isn't great. It lacks the visceral punch of the fight scenes from the Netflix series, and as a load of goons are going for Daredevil, She-Hulk comes through the roof onto the goons, and those guys would be lucky to be alive. So She-Hulk and Daredevil beat the goons. LeapFrog tries to escape by jumping through a window and breaks his legs, so it appears someone read the comics, which just makes all of this more baffling. How do you read the comics and then make something that's far worse in every way possible? So after they rescue him, Urkel the tailor forgives Jen, and then Matt and Jen bond and flirt some more. And then they go back to her place and make love. And it's okay for this series. Good rarely, but this is just not something that the Netflix Daredevil would have done. He's not an easy man to get close to. He knew Karen for a long time before he finally let her in. Daredevil just wasn't a man-tart. He wasn't slutty. This is just not Matt Murdock. The darkness is not there. Neither is his need for penance. In the morning, Charlie Cox is gone and geez, did he not leave a note or say goodbye either? Instead we get a scene of Matt Murdock doing the walk of shame in his Daredevil suit, and again, they're feminising a man for laughs. Men don't do the walk of shame after spending the night at a woman's house. We instead do the walk of pride. So She-Hulk goes to her award show. She's up on stage making her acceptance speech, and intelligentsia hack the electronics to humiliate her. They put up hacked stuff from her phone, a collection of photos of Captain America's bottom that they got from her phone, and a video Josh made of him and She-Hulk in bed together. She-Hulk loses it and destroys the building. Then she's arrested by some unknown men with guns outside. And Hollywood, can we please stop the ginger side? I have no idea how Hollywood misses some of the very obvious talent that's out there. You want someone to play a redhead, say Ariel the Little Mermaid? Well, you could call Karen Gillan, or there's an actress in the UK called Eleanor Tomlinson, who's very glamorous, attractive, she seems to be a quite able actor. She was wildly popular in a TV adaptation of Poldark with Aidan Turner. And speaking of that, Hollywood, will you please notice that Aidan Turner exists and put him in some films? The ladies really seem to like Aidan Turner, and there's loads of talent in the UK and Ireland that barely gets a look in. And what's behind Hollywood's hatred of redheads? There seems to be a view that pale skin colour denotes some kind of privilege. In reality, Celtic peoples have been subjected to repeated historical attacks, including multiple genocides, for most of the last 2,000 years. The idea, for instance, that Irish people or Celtic people are historical oppressors is, I think, difficult to argue. But who am I kidding? They're just looking at their skin colour and making a reflexive judgment, aren't they? And it makes me remember this interview with Jessica Alba, who said, "They couldn't figure out my ethnicity. I would always go out for exotic. They were like, you're not Latin enough to play a Latina, and you're not Caucasian enough to play the leading lady, so you're going to be the exotic one, whatever that means." So yeah, we end up with Gingerside because Hollywood still sounds massively racist. I honestly dread to think how casting decisions are made now in Hollywood, but from what's come out in recent years, in my head, I'm imagining something like this.
Shall we cast this extremely beautiful woman as the leading lady?
Well, can she act?
Never mind if she can act. Get me a photo of her and my Pantone colour chart, and I'll soon tell you if she's leading lady material.
And if her skin colour's right, she's in?
That depends.
On what?
On if she passes the couch test.
And the idea that these same people now have the temerity to come out and lecture the rest of the world on racism and sexism would frankly be laughable, but for the fact they seem to buy into their own propaganda, which makes it kind of sad. And Hollywood still tries to act like it's some sort of moral authority, instead of at least having the good taste and contrition to shut up for a while. And talking about having Jen from She-Hulk as a redhead, I would have been more on board with the series if Deborah Ann Voll from Daredevil was Jen in it. She did a pretty good job in Daredevil, and I haven't seen her in ages. She's got a pretty good range. She's, well, stunning, glamorous, charming. She can do innocent. She can also do dangerous and threatening. And boy can she do threatening. I wasn't a big fan of the series True Blood, but I liked her in it. Maybe a bit too much, and I didn't even mind the fangs. If she came scratching at my window in the middle of the night, I'd frankly be in trouble. I'd be inviting her in. I mean, I have lots of blood. I'm full of the stuff, and my house is full of jars of the stuff. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yes, She-Hulk, attorney at law. I'm just saying, I leave the lids off of the jars and everything, and Deborah Ann Voll still never turns up. What? So you're telling me that Deborah Ann Voll is not really a vampire? What? If she wasn't a vampire, then why would have all these open jars of blood on every surface to attract her? You frankly make no sense at all. Next question. Does Deborah Ann Voll make a better blonde or a redhead? Do I actually prefer her with or without the fangs? So many questions. Only one episode to go. Thank heavens. Let's see if they can stick the landing. And spoiler, they can't.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?